We've looked so far at the effects of aggregate demand and aggregate supply in an economy so that we can try and find equilibrium price level and the equilibrium output. We're now going to have a look at the interactions that the government can have with an economy so that the government can try and get the economy to be at its full potential. So we want full employment, potential GDP being achieved, as well as to be able to control inflation. So that's what the government thinks that they can try and achieve in the market. So they're going to try and change the effects, change perhaps aggregate demand, so that they can achieve this full employment, potential GDP, and hopefully control inflation. So let's see what the government can do in an economy. Well, if we've got our regular aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, with price and output, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. What would happen if there was a sudden decrease in investment? Suddenly managers are very pessimistic about the economy, and so there is a sudden decrease in investment, and it will shift this aggregate demand curve to the left, AD1. Now prices are quite sticky downwards, so you might even have output dropping all the way to this point, from Y1 to Y2. Now what can the government do? Well, there are a number of choices. We're firstly going to look at the fiscal policy that the government can follow. When I say fiscal policy only deals with government being able to change the government purchases and the taxes. So please remember that fiscal policy only deals with changes in government expenditure and changes in taxes. So the government can now try and shift this AD curve back to its original position to try counteract the shock of a decrease in investment. How can they counteract this investment? Well, you know that the aggregate demand curve shifts with all the functions of the aggregate expenditure, consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. So with the decrease in investment, it shifted left, but with an increase in government expenditure, you can shift it back to the right. So if you increase government expenditure, you can shift it back to the right, or if you decrease taxes. So those are the only two factors that can be used in fiscal policy. So hopefully it can shift it back. If there was a potential 20 million rand decrease or 20 million decrease in output, you would only have to increase, if the multiplier was 4, you would only have to increase government expenditure by 5 million. So remember that multiplier effect. If there is a potential drop in output of 20 million and the multiplier is 4, you only have to increase government expenditure by 5 million. Why? Because the change in output is equal to the multiplier, which is 4, times by the change in government spending, which is 5, so 4 times 5 is 20.